Firstly, let me introduce myself. I'm York Rodder, and my company name is The Good Way, and it's taken from Jeremiah chapter 6, verse 16, where the prophet says, "Stop and stand and look for the good way. Ask and ask for the ancient paths, those that worked before, and then walk in it, and you will find rest for your soul." And so, back to Banting. Banting was an undertaker in the year 1862. 30 years he had spent looking for a way to reduce weight, because he was corpulent, that was the word he used. And this is the Banting Pocket Guide by Tim Noakes and some dietitians. And I like the word Banting because it's after a real man who had tremendous courage to keep going for 30 years and failing for 30 years to lose weight. And so the Banting diet is primarily known for weight loss, but I really embrace it fully because I believe it's for everyone to at least know about it and understand. And it is, in essence, following the advice that he was given by a Dr. William Harvey in 1862. William Harvey said, "My good man, you just need to cut out two things in your diet: saccharine matter and starch." He'd never heard of cutting out just two things. He had been told in everything moderation, and he'd been told light meals. He'd been given lots of medication and nothing helped consistently. The place we know about Banting, most famously in South Africa, is through a Professor Tim Noakes. And in, I think it was 2013, just before Christmas, him and Jono Proudfoot, both of them are heroes of mine, brought out this book in an amazing time and hit the Christmas market in 2013 and became a bestseller. And others who have followed this idea of cutting out saccharine matter, which means sugar, and starch, together we call them carbohydrates. They are carbohydrates, and so some people refer to this way of eating as low carb, high fat. Or others who've been trying to share the wonderful news about it have realized that high fat puts people off because they don't understand. So rather low carb, which is the key, and healthy fats, which I'll mention briefly in this. But so LCHF, and then the other name that I think explains what happens is the keto diet or the ketogenic diet, because that's more scientific. And basically, instead of burning carbohydrates for your energy, or primarily carbohydrates, we start burning fat, which we all really would like to do, but we've been put off it for some reason, which maybe we'll explain later. So burning fats means that our blood has ketones in them, which are very high energy, fat-derived bodies, and automatically as we get into ketosis and our reliance on insulin is less. And our reliance on carbohydrates, our reliance on glucose for a form of energy reduces, and the advantage of that is that insulin is no longer necessary, or we're no longer going to be dependent on more and more insulin. So carbohydrates needs insulin to process it, to get it into the cells, and ketones do not require insulin. And so the problems with insulin is that it's a fat storing hormone, and we're very difficult to release fat from our body, and it's also a hunger creating hormone. So insulin is a wonderful hormone. If you don't have it, you will eventually end up with type 1 diabetes, and if nobody gives it to you, you'll die. Basically, you'll get weaker and weaker and lose more and more weight. So insulin is necessary. If you take too much insulin, your body can't handle that either, and you become addicted to insulin. You become, your insulin no longer has any power. You become insulin resistant, and that is really the cause of diabetes type 2, is too much insulin. Many doctors will prescribe to type 2 diabetics. They'll, as a person battles to control their blood glucose, they are prescribed insulin, which is really the worst thing you can do. You make it even worse. What they really need is a ketogenic diet. There are other names: paleo diet, basically meat and lots of fat, and what our cavemen ancestors had. No dairy. I think dairy is really a wonderful food, and then Atkins is another name. And Atkins for 30 years was a practicing doctor who had great success and a great following, and it was known as Atkins diet. Tim Noakes, Professor Tim Noakes, read this book, and within a couple of hours he was converted. He calls it his Damascus experience. He called it a system. We now call it the Banting diet. God bless you.